Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece for Reason to Resist on May 18th, 2026. I'd like to begin today's report by making a bold prediction, and one which I am not at all happy to have to make. And my prediction is that before the end of 2026, Russia will retaliate to the West's countless provocations by striking at least one military industrial target in at least one European NATO country. And Russia, let me say at the outset, might well go further than that before the end of the year by striking several military industrial targets in several European NATO countries. In my view, the prime candidates for these targeted attacks are Poland, the United Kingdom, Germany, Romania, and the Baltic states. Now, although it might be that Russia will carry out one or more of these strikes with tactical nuclear weapons, I think it's much more likely that Russia will strike these targets, at least initially, with conventional weapons, and most likely with hypersonic missiles. Whether Russia will then resort to nuclear weapons will depend entirely, or at least in large part, on how Western governments react to these targeted strikes by conventional weapons. In this report, I'm going to explain why I'm making this prediction. But before I begin, I'd like to remind you that if you find this video to be informative, please do like and share it. And if you're not already a subscriber, please become one. Help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic resistance journalism and to reach our goal of surpassing 200,000 subscribers before the 2-year anniversary of Reason to Resist, which is at the end of the summer this year. So with that, let's now turn to recent developments in Russia and the Ukraine war, which form the basis of the admittedly dark prediction that I just started my report with today. Over the weekend, Ukraine launched its largest drone attack on Russia since the Ukraine war began more than 4 years ago. The number of drones used by Ukraine reportedly exceeded 1,500, and most of them appear to have targeted Moscow. And you see here a report published yesterday by Al Jazeera, which discusses the results of those attacks. At least 5 people, Al Jazeera reported, have been killed after Ukraine launched what Russian officials described as one of the largest drone barrages of the war. I think it's actually the largest, sending waves of unmanned aircraft towards Moscow and several other regions overnight. Interestingly, the Indian embassy, according to Al Jazeera, in Russia, said 1 Indian worker was killed and 3 others were injured during the drone attacks in the Moscow region. And by the way, if Volodymyr Zelensky is trying to poison Ukrainian relations with India, he seems to be doing a mighty fine job. The Al Jazeera article goes on to state that Moscow region's governor, Andrei Vorobyov, added that a woman was killed after a drone slammed into a house in Khimki, north of Moscow. And the regional governor added that the apartment buildings and infrastructure sites were also damaged in the attacks. Moscow is obviously not the same place that it was before this war began. The frequency with which it is being struck by Ukrainian drones is increasing, and the lethality of the attacks also appears to be on the rise. CGTN Europe has published a brief video compilation of this massive drone strike, and I'd like to share it with you now. You saw from that video, although a number of those drones were intercepted over Moscow, and by Russian accounts, the vast majority of the incoming drones were intercepted. Nonetheless, several of them struck high-rise apartment buildings. Others struck infrastructure, communications infrastructure, such as an antenna, and also energy infrastructure, causing large fires, which the emergency workers struggled to put under control overnight. Now, what happened this weekend is not an isolated event at this stage of the war. It is, in fact, part of a larger pattern, and that's the part that should concern us the most, that the situation is escalating. Since last year, NATO and its Ukrainian proxy have expanded their drone attacks. The attacks are becoming larger, and they're going deeper into Russia's strategic rear. Today, France's paper of record, Le Monde, published an article which correctly reported that Ukraine is now capable of striking 2,000 kilometers from its border with Russia. And the Le Monde article stated as follows: the Ukrainian military is now regularly striking, I repeat, regularly, deep inside Russian territory, exposing the Kremlin's security flaws for all to see. In recent months, the range of Ukrainian drones has extended to the heart of the Urals, the ancient mountain chain dividing European Russia from Asian Russia. Cities nearly 2,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, such as Chelyabinsk, Yekaterinburg, Perm, and Cheboksary, have been repeatedly targeted. Now, although the Le Monde report is accurate in some respects, it does suffer from at least two significant defects. First, Le Monde claims that the drone strikes, as you just heard, have exposed Russia's security flaws. That's the phrase it used. There is, however, a mountain of evidence that Russia possesses the world's best air defense system, certainly amongst the very best. The problem is that no one, including Russia, has yet developed an air defense system that provides perfect protection from drones, and especially large swarms of drones. Indeed, the latest US-Israel war of aggression on Iran has demonstrated conclusively that Israel's air defenses are, and not just Israel's, but the best air defenses that the United States can muster, have been repeatedly penetrated, not only by the drones of Iran, but also by drones shot from Yemen by Ansar Allah, and particularly from South Lebanon by the Lebanese resistance. In the past few weeks, Hezbollah has succeeded repeatedly in piercing Israel's air defenses with drone swarms that are tiny compared to those that Ukraine now employs, with the full backing of Western militaries, and almost certainly with intelligence provided by the United States military. And I'm just going to show you one of those dozens of Lebanese resistance videos showing the efficacy of their drone strikes on targets, military targets in northern occupied Palestine and South Lebanon. Now, a few points about this video, and this is just one of many. I could show you dozens and dozens of video like this. There's no indication that this drone strike was part of a swarm. There are no other drones visible in that video. and nor is there the apparent aftermath of some drone that struck before this drone entered the scene and hit its target. Secondly, there was absolutely no indication that this drone encountered any fire from the ground, any air defense opposition as it was coming in. And in fact, it came in very slowly. It came in so slowly that it was able to capture useful surveillance footage and, relay it back to the operator of the drone in Lebanon, which would be used potentially in subsequent attacks. It didn't come in at high speed. It came in quite slowly in a leisurely pace, and it struck a Merkava tank and happened to record that there were other Merkava tanks and military pieces of military hardware in the vicinity at the time. So if the Lebanese resistance, with its tiny military budget, can get away with this, just by using single drones or perhaps very small drone swarms, like 5 or 10, 15 drone swarms. And I've seen no evidence, by the way, that the Lebanese resistance has ever been able to mount a single attack involving 100, 150, or 200 drones. It simply doesn't appear to have that many drones at its disposal. And yet every single day, it is piercing Israel's air defenses. So as I say, the problem that Russia confronts is not unique to Russia. In fact, Russia is probably better capable of dealing with this problem than any other military in the world, including the United States and Israel. But the problem is that no one has yet developed a technology that provides perfect or anywhere close to perfect protection from these kind of large-scale drone attacks. And that poses a serious challenge for Russia's national security. Now, 1 month ago, Russia's government published a list of European drone suppliers. And here is a report in Euronews about the publication of that list. And when it published the list, the Russian Defense Ministry said that joint ventures between European corporations and Ukrainian corporations pursuant to which these drones are being produced are a step towards escalation. That's the phrase that the Russian Defense Ministry used. It added that such collaboration risks, quote, increasingly dragging European countries into war, close quote. And one Russian official, according to Euronews, called the manufacturers themselves potential military targets. In late March, some EU governments decided to increase the production and supply of drones to Ukraine for use in strikes on Russian territory, and to expand the financing of enterprises located in European countries for the production of attack drones and their components. The Russian Ministry of Defense added, quote, "We regard this decision as a deliberate step leading to a sharp escalation of the military and political situation on the entire European continent and the creeping transformation of these countries into Ukraine's strategic rear," close quote. And the Russian Ministry of Defense added that strikes against Russia using drones produced in Europe could lead to, quote, "unpredictable consequences," close quote. And let me assure you, my friends, that given the evidence, the undeniable, indisputable evidence that European NATO members are providing the Ukrainians with both the material, the physical means, and the intelligence, and the United States is also doing this, to launch these attacks on Russian territory, particularly against civilian targets. And you saw that a number of those drones did strike civilian infrastructure with lethal consequences. The Russians have a right under the laws of war to strike the facilities that are producing these lethal military weapons. So for reasons that should be a matter of some discussion in the West, the Russians until now have refrained from striking a single target on outside of Ukraine. There's no evidence that they have intentionally targeted any military industrial facility or military base or even civilian target inside a European member of NATO, or even indeed in a country like Moldova, which is not part of NATO, but which in some ways does appear to be assisting Ukraine. So Rather than heed the stark warning that the Russians gave at the time they published this list of European facilities that were being used to manufacture drones for Ukraine, the EU and its Ukrainian proxy decided to escalate their drone attacks on Russia. It seems at the end of the day that Europe's deranged political elite wants war with Russia. Almost all of Europe's NATO members, Spain is an honorable exception, have agreed since Trump returned to the White House in January of last year to raise their military spending to the extraordinary and ruinous level of 5% of GDP. Then they boldly declared that they would be ready for war with Russia in 2030. Here's an article from Politico Europe published last year, which talks about this open declaration of their intention to be ready for war with the Russian Federation within less than 4 years' time. And if you think about it, if you're sitting in the leadership chair of the Russian government, why would you wait until the Europeans are ready to wage war against your country when you have the ability to strike them now, when by their own implicit admission, if not explicit admission, they're not ready for war? If you're going to protect your people, ensure your national security, you believe the attack is coming. And in fact, it's not just coming, it's ongoing. And given the amount of money that European governments are committing to the militarization of the continent, you can anticipate that this is just going to escalate. In fact, they just gave to Ukraine a 90 billion euro loan. It's not a loan, by the way. Ukraine is never going to be able to pay that money back. That is a fraud they're perpetrating on the peoples of Europe. It was yet another gift to the corrupt Zelensky regime. But you can be sure that even after the corrupt Zelensky regime skims off hundreds of millions or maybe even a few billion euros from that so-called loan, there's going to be a lot of money left to sustain attacks on Russia for many months to come. And as I say, if you're telegraphing to a nuclear armed state that you're getting ready to wage war against it in less than 4 years' time, you are incentivizing the state in question to attack you before you develop the capacity to wage war against it. Now, on top of this, Russia's government is coming under increasing pressure to punish Europe for enabling Ukraine's deadly strikes deep into Russian territory, pressure from within the country itself. The war has now been going on, as I mentioned, for more than 4 years. Russian soldiers, the number of them killed in action surely is in the tens of thousands at this stage, may well exceed 100,000, and by a wide margin. We may be into the hundreds of thousands. I don't believe these fantastical claims. There's no evidence to back them up that the Russians have suffered, millions killed in action, but the number certainly could be several 100,000, and it's definitely got to be over 100,000 by this stage. At a bare minimum as well, hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have been wounded. Many of the wounded have been permanently disabled. In addition, although Russia's economy performed remarkably well for the first 3 years of the war, it now appears to have entered a period of relative stagnation. The IMF recently raised its GDP growth forecast for the Russian Federation for 2026 to 1.1%, a meager 1.1% from 0.8%, and that is due to higher prices for oil and other commodities, which Russia has in abundance. The article notes here, this is a Reuters article, that the Russian economy slowed sharply in 2025 to around 1% growth, so that's last year, from 4.9% in 2024, due to the central bank's tight monetary policy and Western sanctions. The economy is also under strain from spending on the war in Ukraine. This is a matter of some controversy in Russia, by the way, the very tight monetary policy of the Russian central bank, high interest rates, which appear to be designed to tamp down on inflation and support the Russian ruble. But in any case, although these numbers aren't what one could reasonably describe as economic crisis, This is not helping the standing of the Russian government with the Russian people. And I'm sure that a lot of Russians are beginning to be concerned about the economic impacts of the sanctions and the war on the country, much more so than was the case, let's say, about 2 years ago. And of course, this is reflected in the polls. The polling figures that I'm about to show you are from the reputable Russian polling firm Levada. Levada, by the way, is not friendly to Vladimir Putin. It is actually critical of Vladimir Putin. But nonetheless, I have repeatedly cited its polling figures. I believe them to be essentially reliable, and they are cited widely by people in both the corporate media and in the alternative media. And according to Levada, let me just put up on the screen here the results of its most recent polling. The approval rating for the Russian government has fallen from approximately 77% 1 year ago in May 2025 to 63% last month in April of this year. Now, 63% is a pretty good level of support compared to most Western governments nowadays, especially the hapless and widely despised governments of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and the United States. But the trajectory of public opinion in Russia must be causing significant concern to Russia's leadership. In addition, and this is equally troubling from my perspective, respected voices in Russian politics have become increasingly outspoken about the need to strike Europe and strike it hard. Recently, Professor Sergei Karaganov gave an extremely important interview to Norwegian political scientist Glenn Deason. By the way, we've had Glenn Deason on our program. He offers vitally important geopolitical analysis. And this was a very important interview that Glenn did recently. Professor Karaganov heads the Russian Council for Foreign and Defense Policy. He's also the Dean of the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs at Moscow's Higher School of Economics. He has been presidential advisor to Vladimir Putin and is considered close to President Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Now, I'm going to play for you a full 5-minute clip of Glenn's interview of Professor Karaganov. I know that that's a bit on the long side, a 5-minute clip, but in my opinion, it is eminently worth listening to in its entirety.
Throughout this conflict, or at least over the past 4 years, there's seemingly been always a dilemma in Russia. That is, as the NATO side escalates again, and the NATO side did recognize it escalated. I always point out that Joe Biden once argued that sending F-16s would mean World War III. So, but we kind of crossed all these lines, and but for the Russians, I guess they always have to choose. They want to keep things stable, or either risk world war by retaliating, or not retaliating, but then essentially emboldening the other side, and then see further escalation. So how you've argued for the need to actually use nuclear weapons, though, in order to essentially restore its deterrent. Is it correct?
Yeah. This war has brought a lot of benefits to Russia. It had recuperated from its idleness. We have restored our soul and our honor. We have started to value those people in our society, which are truly valuable, meritocratic elites, scholars, doctors, officers. So, and the country is becoming more healthy. But for that, we are paying for too many bodies. So my advice to my government at this juncture is that we should stop this war, at least in Europe, by going up the ladder of escalation. First, attacking by conventional weapons certain symbolic or logistical points on the European soil.
So, in case you didn't make it out, what he said there was by striking certain logistical points, he characterized this as symbolic in nature on European soil. That's his recommendation for the first escalatory step.
Not an inch of Europe, as you might understand. And then if they do not succumb, we should follow with nuclear strikes, relatively massive, with, of course, offering some kind of ultimatum. If they do not succumb, well, some of the countries of Europe should perish. That is my suggestion, though I pray God, and I'm a believer.
Look, I shouldn't have to repeat this, but this is what he said, okay? A man who commands respect amongst the Russian leadership. Some of the countries of Europe should perish. Now, listen to what he has to say in the balance of his commentary.
That wouldn't happen. But I believe that these people have lost their minds, lost sense of history. These elites, they're totally responsible, and they should be punished. So that's why, in addition to many other things, I propose that our military nuclear doctrine should concentrate not only on deterring attacks against Russia proper, but it should concentrate against punishing European elites, including with special munitions, which would do away now with their bunkers. And the first waves should go there. The European elites, which are senseless, which are responsible, should suffer first, not the European peoples. But we are debating this issue, and sooner or later this debate will come to the fruition.
Well, I remember you made these arguments a while back already, but do you get a feeling that the mood in the Kremlin is shifting now more towards your arguments, or has it not moved that much?
I am not here to talk about the mood in Kremlin. When I started 3 years ago to put the idea on the table, I was the proud voice of a minority. Now I am a voice of the overwhelming majority, both in the military, in the political circles, and in the society.
To repeat, he says that he was in the minority when he began to advocate for this 3 years ago, but now he's in the overwhelming majority in the military, political circles, and Russian society. You'll see that he mercifully indicated his suggestion is that they target European elites at the beginning. If Russia were to effectively eliminate European elites as an escalatory step, I do wonder how many Europeans would be upset about that at the end of the day. But let us hope that we can find a peaceful way to deal with the madness of these elites. And I want to talk a little bit about two other things before I wrap it up. The first thing is the question of morality. Now, you can take the position that Russia deserves what it's getting, and I know that there are a lot of people in Europe who say this. I, for myself, don't agree with this. I've been talking about this since 2022. I believe that Western governments provoked this war. I think they wanted and tried for many years to get Russia to invade Ukraine because they wanted a pretext to force European governments to separate themselves from the Russian energy sector so that Europe would then become weaker. It would have to buy more expensive energy from the United States, which is exactly what it did. And this has not only made Europe weaker, but it's made the United States richer. So in order to get Europeans to go along with that project, they needed some dramatic Russian act of aggression. And the invasion of Ukraine, which they orchestrated, they provoked, was just what the doctor ordered. The plan worked brilliantly from the perspective of, making Europe weaker and dependent to a far greater degree on the United States, while it's simultaneously enriching the energy sector of the United States to an even greater degree. They also wanted Western governments to have a pretext to impose economy-destroying sanctions on Russia. And so the invasion of Ukraine provided them with that pretext. The provocations started all the way back in 2014 when the West did provoke a coup in Ukraine. The democratically elected, president of the country, Yanukovych, who was simply trying to maintain good relations with both Europe and Russia. He wasn't a puppet of Russia, as has been claimed. He was trying to maintain relations with both, which was a sensible thing to do, given the fact that Ukraine shares a long border with Russia and a great history with Russia, while at the same time sharing border with European NATO members. But doing that careful balancing act was a bridge too far for the West, and so they orchestrated a coup, and Yanukovych was replaced by virulent Ukrainian nationalists who were deeply hostile to Russia, to everything Russian, including the language, the culture, the history, the church, you name it. And then a civil war broke out. The people who were from the predominantly Russian-speaking parts of the country in the south and the east of Ukraine, who had voted overwhelmingly for Yanukovych, felt that their votes had been stolen from them. And they said, we don't recognize this government. And that's ultimately what led to a civil war in which many innocent civilians in the predominantly Russian-speaking east and south of the country were killed by Ukrainian forces. So even though that happened back in 2014, it wasn't until 2022, 8 years later, that Russian forces entered Ukraine en masse. And even when they did that, Vladimir Putin did not send a large enough army to occupy Kiev or conquer the country. It looks very much as though what he was trying to do was to force the Ukrainian government to come to the negotiating table to do some kind of a deal that would respect the rights of the Russian speakers, bring an end to the hostilities. And he almost succeeded in that, except that when Ukraine, a couple of months after this invasion began, was on the verge of signing a peace deal, the psycho zombie Joe Biden sent his chihuahua from London, Boris Johnson, to speak with Zelensky, and he ended up tanking. Zelensky ended up tearing up the deal that he was on the verge of signing. And it was at that point that the war intensified. So I would have preferred, and I wrote this at the time back in 2022, that there not be an invasion of Russia, but to pretend that we are innocent in all of this and that our motives are pure and that our support for Ukraine is driven by our deep respect for democracy and our concern that the principles of international law be upheld is utterly laughable. All you have to do is look at the way Western governments have conducted themselves in West Asia, and particularly Palestine, to understand that they don't give a damn about international law, human rights, democracy, or just even basic human decency, okay? So that's what this war is all about. But let's suppose you disagree with all that. Let's suppose you decide you want to ignore the historical record and drink the NATO Kool-Aid and say this was an unprovoked aggression and Russia's trying to reconstitute the Soviet Empire and all the rest of that nonsense. You buy it, you believe it, okay, fine. Do you really want to risk the future of all that you hold dear? Your children, your home, your life, your health, the future of humanity, so that Ukraine can retain, 20% or 25% of its pre-war territory? Are you willing to risk it all for that? Why are we telling the Palestinians, the Western governments, though they claim to be supporters of the two-state solution, right? Well, if the two-state solution were actually to be implemented, and Israel has done everything it can to destroy the two-state solution, and for all intents and purposes, it's dead because of Israel's actions and actions that have been supported by the West. But let's suppose that Israel, actually implemented the two-state solution, the Palestinians would end up not with 80% or 75% of historic Palestine, which is what Ukraine would end up with if it accepted Russia's demands. It would end up with 75 or 80% of the pre-war Ukrainian territory. No, if the two-state solution were implemented, the Palestinians would get something like 20%, 15 to 20% of historic Palestine. Okay? So we're telling the Palestinians, our governments are telling the Palestinians, and they're not even serious about it. They actually do not support the two-state solution. They're helping Israel to take all of it. And they have been from the very beginning of the creation of Israel. But let's take them at their word. Okay, fine. So why are you saying to the Palestinians they should be content with 15 or 20% of historic Palestine, but you think it is outrageous that the Ukrainians should have to give up a single inch of their territory to the Russians? Even the parts of their territory that are occupied or that are inhabited predominantly by Russian speakers who want nothing to do with the Ukrainian nationalist government in Kiev. I mean, there's no way to square this circle. There's no way to reconcile these positions. The hypocrisy is extreme. It's outrageous. But again, even if you don't accept my account of how we got here, and you think the way Russia is behaving is immoral and they deserve to have their asses handed to them, at the end of the day, what you're dealing with here, you're dealing with a state that has the world's most destructive nuclear arsenal. It is a powerful state that has the ability to defend itself. It does regard this war as existential, and it will not capitulate. I said back in 2022, and I say it again, there are two ways and two ways only that this war can end. One is with Ukraine capitulating, which doesn't mean giving up all of its territory, but giving up a significant chunk of it, or we're all dead. Those are the two options. Which option do you prefer? That's my question to you folks. Now, the last reason why I say that an attack on European NATO member states by Russia is now inevitable, even though Russia tried to avoid this for many years, just as they boxed Vladimir Putin into a corner and forced him to finally send forces into Ukraine, they have now boxed him into a corner again, and they're forcing him to launch attacks on European NATO member states. Why? Because they want to go to war with Russia. They want to go to war with Russia. They're salivating for this war, and they want the United States to come in full bore with them. That's how crazy these people are. Okay? But there's another factor here which leads me to believe that this is now inevitable, and that is the war in Iran. So this is my final point, and let me explain why I think it is relevant. It has now become apparent, and it is undoubtedly known to a great many Russians, that during this criminal war of aggression on Iran, which started on February 28th, the Iranians delivered devastating blows to multiple U.S. military bases in the Persian Gulf. Even the corporate media in the United States has been obliged to confirm through detailed reporting that most of the U.S. military bases in the Persian Gulf region have been rendered unusable. That's the word they use to describe the deplorable condition of those military bases. Hardly any of them escaped serious damage, and as I say, a majority of them appear to be completely unusable. So not only did Iran, in defense of its sovereign territory, strike Israel and other countries in West Asia that are deeply allied with Washington, so-called allies, when in fact they're proxies and vassals. Not only did it do that, but it actually struck U.S. military bases repeatedly and killed U.S. military personnel, shot down, the most advanced warplanes that the United States has, shot down drones, launched missiles, and probably damaged significantly a number of important naval vessels in the United States Navy. Iran did all of that and more. And Iran, my friends, does not have a single nuclear weapon. Not one. So if you're a Russian and you're sitting there looking at the situation your country finds itself in, you've been waging war against the United States and Europe through Ukraine for over 4 years. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of your soldiers have died. Hundreds of thousands have been wounded. Your economy has lost huge sums of money. because of these crushing sanctions. And you see that your government, your military, has not struck a single European state that is aiding in every imaginable way the Ukrainian effort to defeat Russia and to mount attacks against Russian soldiers on Russian territory, against civilian targets, against key infrastructure. Your government, after all of this time, has refrained from attacking a single European member of NATO, even just a pin-prick strike on some particular military industrial facility, a symbolic strike, as Karaganov said. Not even that. And your country, Russia, has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, okay? The most formidable deterrent to any kind of a major counterattack. You'd be asking yourself, why the hell will my government not do what Iran did when Iran was willing to do it and got away with it, and they don't have a single nuclear weapon? There is no good answer to that question. If I'm a Russian and I'm looking at the situation and I'm reasonably well informed about what Iran has managed to do during the course of this criminal war of aggression, I would be feeling mighty uncomfortable with my government's reticence to inflict any kind of a punishment on the European states, especially the chihuahuas, like, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, which are constantly warmongering and employing Russophobic rhetoric, putting hostile forces on their soil, allowing Ukrainian drones to fly over their territory so they can attack strategic targets inside Russia. They wouldn't even attack the Baltic states. Now, I'm not saying that I want to see these states attacked. I'm just telling you how I would feel if I were a Russian looking at the situation. I would be asking myself, why is Iran able to do this without any nuclear weapons at all to deter a crushing counterstrike? And we won't do it at all. We won't strike any of Washington's vassals in the region who are helping Ukraine, let alone Washington itself. So I think that the events in Iran are likely Iran's success in inflicting severe punishment, not just on Washington's vassals in West Asia, but on the US military itself directly, is likely to be increasing significantly the political pressure on the Russian government to make Europe's NATO members pay, at least some of them, and pay severely for their enabling Ukraine to mount attacks deep inside Russia, including attacks that are killing civilians. So for all of those reasons, I am absolutely convinced at this stage, about as convinced as I can be, that we are about to enter a new phase of the Ukraine war, which will involve direct Russian strikes on one or more European members of NATO. And finally, a personal reflection. Many times I've wondered in my life how Europeans allowed themselves to ignite and to become the central battlefield for not just one, but two world wars. And now I think I finally understand how that happened, because I'm watching it happen in real time. It happened, as far as I can tell, because of the complacency, the arrogance, and rampant nationalism of a large segment of the European population. Far too many Europeans continue to view themselves as superior to the rest of the world. They seem to believe that they have some divine or even genetic right to dominate the entire planet, but they do not. And the rest of the world understands this perfectly well and has, quite frankly, had enough of it. If anything, the history of Europe proves that Europe is singularly unqualified to be the leader of the free world, and so too are Europe's colonial progeny, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. How many genocides and wars of aggression must Europe and its colonial progeny perpetrate before we finally accept that Europe is colossally unfit to be the leader of the free world? How many systems of enslavement must Europe produce? How many countries must it reduce to ruins? How many democratic movements must it crush? How many pristine environments must it poison for generations to come? Ultimately, if you vote, and this is my most important message to people listening to this report, if you vote for the Western political parties that provoke these wars, or even if you just sit idly by and do nothing as they ignite and escalate these wars, then you are responsible for the suffering they cause and for the calamity that is about to befall us all. And you have only yourself to blame when the calamity comes to your own doorstep. I, for one, refuse to sit idly by as Western elites set fire to the planet. And I know that many, many members of our audience feel exactly as I do. And for those of you who have not yet gotten to that point, my final words to you are: the time to act is now. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on May 18th, 2026.